Awesome. Ooh, welcome back to the Pop Culture Powerhouses. This week we have got two of our A tier, B tier, A tier, B tier, backwards forwards heroes. Daredevil versus the Flash. The blind man versus the fast man.
I mean, I'm going to have to correct you here. One of these has no one to care about them, as we recently discovered. The Flash has no fans. um,
Uh,
but yeah, Daredevil versus Flash. I mean, two iconic characters, but we will get into both. Well,
yes.
one of them about to have their rise again in media.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the Flash we get to see in the DCU eventually. Um,
Well, this is the interesting thing for me, right? Because they both had very successful TV shows around the same time.
yes, true.
And now they're both kind of going opposite directions after that, if that makes sense. Like
Mm,
Daredevil went away for a little while and he's come back stronger. The Flash went away for a little while, got a film, and now everyone's like, fuck, are we going to see the Flash in the
never
next 10
again.
years now?
Yeah,
Or has he just been benched? So I thought it was kind of the best time to
yeah,
see where we put them in the zeitgeist.
yeah.
As always, we've got our six categories: iconicness,
Mm-hmm.
individuality, quality of adaptations, legacy, relatability, and personal preference.
Yes.
So, starting off with iconicness, this is potentially one of the most difficult ones we've had. And we need to answer a question before we start. Are we talking about the mantle of the Flash or a particular Flash?
I feel like, as we did with Robin, we did the mantle of. And I
Okay.
think it's only fair to still do that with the Flash.
I'd be inclined to agree. Because if we were to not take the mantle, I feel like for comic books you need Wally West's Flash, at which point you can't include the TV show or the
Mm,
film because that was Barry.
yeah.
Okay, iconicness.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a difficult one. The Flash has been around basically for fucking ever in one form or another.
Yeah.
He's one of the characters that's kind of aged and matured and evolved the best through the Silver Age into the Golden Age and the modern era.
Uh-huh.
Whereas Daredevil was kind of redefined by the Frank Miller run. He was a good, well rounded character, but then Frank Miller came in, gave him the tragic backstory,
Mm-hmm.
gave him the story of saving the little girl and being a bit more violent, and kind of turned Daredevil in a way that made him, at the time, and like obviously following on from that, but at the time in like the 80s, it was like, oh, this is gritty and dark
Mm.
and new. And then as a result of that, Daredevil, I feel like, has never not been doing pretty well in the comics.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the comic side I don't massively know that well, but
Mm,
like I would say the Flash is always a name that you think of when thinking DC.
mm.
And for me, at least, Daredevil was more. That was a name that more came up when Netflix brought it
Yes,
to light.
the power Netflix did for the mainstream appeal for Daredevil
Mm,
cannot be understated. Whereas I agree, I think with the Flash, when you think of like Marvel and DC, you've got like the big three for each, right? You've got
yep.
Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and
Yeah.
then the traditional big three for Marvel is Hulk, Wolverine, Spider Man.
Yep.
Post MCU, it's kind of Thor, Iron Man, Captain America. And where these characters sit in relation to the big three is and maybe I'm tripping here, the Flash is like next up, right next to the
Yeah.
big three, in my opinion.
I would
Whereas I
agree.
don't think Daredevil is.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. That's like sort of like what the MCU did to Iron Man, Captain America, and bumped them up. Netflix did for Daredevil, whereas the Flash has kind of always kind of just been there next up.
Everyone knew the Flash as a kid. Like
Yeah.
he's the fast dude. Like
Yeah. It like the advantage he had was you've got Superman, super strong and all that. You've got Batman that everyone then loves, Wonder Woman, and then Oh, the super fast dude. Like,
Yeah,
easy to remember, iconic. That's the Flash. He's
yeah.
next down. Like, yeah, he's always been a step ahead. I think the interesting thing has come for Iconic-ness since Netflix and in this sort of like 2000s era of Netflix bumped Daredevil up, I would say MCU level of popularity because of how much people
Oh,
still talk
absolutely,
about the Netflix show.
absolutely.
And then The Flash kind of sort of plateaued, has stayed at its same level because like the TV show was good, but it was never like hugely raved about to the same level as Daredevil is.
No, but I think it is also fair to say they're very different shows. Like
Yeah,
Flash was on a major American network doing
yeah,
24 episode series,
yeah,
and I think of them 24 episode series shows like Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, blah
mm.
blah blah.
Oh
The
yeah,
Flash was by far and away
yeah,
consistently
agreed.
the best.
I, it's just yeah, I would say it had a solid show, but was already kind of at that level. I don't think the show necessarily bumped it way up like the Netflix one did
Um,
for Daredevil.
it didn't do as much. It definitely elevated it a little bit. Because like for me, that was when I really fell in love with the Flash. Was via that show.
Fair.
That introduced me more to the. I was aware of the Flash, but then
Well,
I was
yeah,
like,
like
oh, this fucks hard, and that's like, the Flash would probably be. Yeah, no, that would be right about the time I considered getting into comics as well. The Flash was the first comics I got, some of
fair.
the new 52 Flash comics. So it definitely did help. Um, but again, it's always difficult to tell because it came around the right time with like the
Yeah,
superhero boom. So you
yeah.
can never just say it was just the show. But
True.
you have people, they were having
Just in
superhero stuff that
general,
they were loving,
yeah,
and they were like more, 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 and then it
yeah.
was like Flash TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I agree it didn't do as much as Daredevil, but I think that was because there was less it could do than Daredevil.
Yeah. And then I think the only other thing then is like, has the film hurt its iconicness?
And that is the big thing. I think the Flash film, and this was my fear if you remember, has done so much damage
So
to the Flash.
here's my thing. I I don't think it's hurt how iconic he is,
No, it's hurt
but
how much work he's going to get.
it's hurt his current perception in like for film and TV. Because I'm sure the comic fans that are reading the comics are still the current comics. I'm sure are still enjoyed and loved. Obviously, people that are watching superhero media have only experienced maybe the TV show and maybe the film, saw that the film didn't do great and thought, but we'll see if I watch another Flash thing. Like, my attention's now back over here to MCU or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
I don't think it's hurt its iconicness. I just think it's hurt its kind of current perception of like
yeah.
a fan's maybe enjoyment of a Flash project.
I think my answer has always been with like when something goes that wrong is not, oh, let's hide away and hope people forget, because then you get what happened with Green Lantern, and now everyone's scared to do a Green Lantern project, and we're
Yeah.
only just getting over that. Um, I would have literally greenlit a brand new Flash film the very next day and just said, if you worked on the last Flash film, you are banned from being within 10 miles of us making this.
Yeah, to be fair, it needs James Gunn to just be like, yeah, we're making a Flash film.
Yeah, and make it a Wally West film. It doesn't need to be Barry
Yeah,
Allen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
but I need them to not be scared of the IP because that will then self perpetuate.
Mm.
But we digress. Who do we think is more iconic? I think it is the Flash.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like the Flash is more iconic because he has always been at that just below the top tier level for a lot longer. So
I
a
definitely think
wider
the
age range sees the Flash as
yeah.
iconic.
I think that's the big thing, and also I think Daredevil may have had a slight, massive peak with like when the Netflix shows were coming out, and at that point he may have been higher than the Flash, but that is like a moment in time, right, where like everyone's talking about
Yeah,
the new the Daredevil show, And don't get me wrong, people still talk about it, but it's not the same amount. Like Game of Thrones ended, and people hardly talk about Game of Thrones anymore. It's kind of like that in the sense of when Game of Thrones was at its top, Game of Thrones was all anyone spoke about. But now it's cooled off a little bit. Is Game of Thrones still bigger than Lord of the Rings? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I view that.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I do think the Flash would still be bigger.
I would agree.
Individuality.
I mean, the Flash is the guy that runs fast.
So he is like the OG speedster, as far as I'm concerned. There may have been ones before him, but he's the OG speedster. Question is, I think, I'm double checking this, I think Daredevil's the first disabled superhero.
Oh.
The first disabled superhero. Yeah, he was the first superhero with a disability.
Also quite individual.
Like, I mean, forgetting the fact that bearing in mind the joke is that eventually all characters get stolen by the other side and they make their own version.
Yeah.
I can't think of DC's equivalent to Daredevil. Who is DC's Daredevil?
I mean, could you say, I may get roasted for this immediately.
Okay, go on.
Would you not say that Daredevil is more like Marvel's answer to Batman?
No. Batman, ironically, is another kind of character who doesn't have too close of a similarity. What you have is you have a lot of characters have a bit of Batman.
Okay,
Iron Man
yes.
has a bit of Batman.
Yeah,
Moon Knight has a bit of Batman. I would say, although it feels like it because they kind of skulk in the dark,
yeah.
Daredevil is actually very different from Batman in most facets,
I think
other than
that's
kind of like a no-kill rule.
Yeah.
But even the reason that exists is different. Batman's exists because if I start, how will I know I can stop? Whereas Matt's is more, I'm a good Christian boy.
But they both got pointy things on that. But no, yeah, no, I get that. But yeah,
I'm looking through the internets and stuff, and a lot of people have the same opinion that actually Daredevil doesn't really have anyone.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
So maybe in that sense, he is DC's Batman. He's the one that no one really was brave enough to try and copy because they were so well done. You respect it a bit too much.
Yeah.
And his thing, it shouldn't be taken away from the Flash that he's not an individual because other speedsters got written.
Yeah.
But there's also nothing particularly unique about being a speedster. You gave him super speed. Now, don't get me wrong. They have buffed the fuck out of the Flash. You know my opinions. I think he's the strongest superhero. The Speed Force is an interesting way to go about it, but as like a human living in their universe, you're just gonna go, oh, he's fast as fuck. The general public doesn't know the Speed Force exists.
I think I would lean towards Daredevil being more individual on the fact of he was the first disabled superhero.
Yeah.
He hasn't really had copycats in Marvel or in DC. Whereas, yes, the Flash might have been the first, but like you say, he's a speedster. Speedsters are used a lot in superhero stuff. Like, even outside of Marvel and DC, I wouldn't say that Daredevil's been. I can't immediately think of anything around. Oh yeah, that's like Daredevil again.
Yeah. Do you want to know what the closest thing to Daredevil is? I shit you not.
Go on.
And you're gonna laugh at first, but it is the truth. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, no, I see it.
They were designed as like a joke parody of Daredevil. It's canon, I believe, that the same accident that blinded Matt Murdock created Turtles.
Yeah, it's the like chemical.
Yeah, he fights the Hand. They fight the Foot Clan.
Yeah.
Daredevil's taught by Stick. They're taught by Splinter.
Oh shit! Yeah. I did not realize how many things
Yeah,
were. Oh, that's
It
for
was
sure
deliberate.
on
It is absolutely
purpose. Yeah,
deliberate. Yeah,
it's
it's
for
absolutely
sure.
deliberate. Maybe that ties more into legacy, but like that's the
Yeah,
closest in terms of like damaging his individuality there is.
yeah. But I think like purely off his uniqueness and the things he was the first for, I feel like
Hmm.
Daredevil's slightly more individual.
Yeah, and like it cannot be downplayed how crucially important being the first disabled superhero was.
Yeah.
Um, Quality of adaptations.
Both have had subpar films.
Yeah, Ben Affleck has a lot to answer for. Um,
Both
most
have...
most notably, are you and Matt Damon secretly married? But probably second is what the fuck were you thinking of that Daredevil film? But at the
Funny.
same time, while it was not a good film, the adaptation of Daredevil as a character wasn't horrific. Like the essence of the
Yeah.
character, they were still pretty
Mm.
faithful to. It just wasn't a good film.
Yeah.
Like you can have a bad adaptation that is a good product.
I get you.
So like although it's a bad film, I think they kind of got Daredevil pretty accurate in my opinion. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so I might be a
Yeah.
little bit wrong, but I don't remember like thinking back to it. I can't think of it. I'm like, what the fuck were they thinking? I know they got a bit kooky with stuff with like the water tank bed, but that was them getting inventive with like his super hearing. They were like trying something.
Mm.
Um, the big knock on the Flash is his TV show wasn't as good as Daredevil's because of the
Yeah.
nature of it, and that film was a horrific interpretation of the Flash. And I
Mm.
didn't enjoy the way Barry was portrayed in the Justice League either. I think, you know my opinion, I think they
Yeah.
made him too ADHD. And it was supposed to be a way to show that the world's slow and boring to him. But I just didn't like the way it came across.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the film was really bad. And the
Mm-hmm.
show was just average. Whereas the Netflix Daredevil one was, oh shit, this is
Yeah.
loved.
And also with the Flash TV show, when we joked that like they made Green Arrow just be Batman,
Yeah.
to an extent, I feel like, and maybe I'll get crucified for this, I don't know. While Barry was not as bad of a victim of this as Oliver was, I feel like they made him a little bit too Superman. In the sense of like he was supposed to be like this, like I'm just always going to try my best and da 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 da.
Mm.
And more
I
so
get
in
what
the
you
later
mean.
seasons. In the early seasons, they nailed him. He was still, despite having super speed, he still managed to be late everywhere. He was still
Mm.
struggling to like juggle life
Yeah.
and everything. And then it was like, no, you have to have a team and blah 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 blah, and that makes it a worse adaptation because it doesn't feel quite right. But
Yeah.
it was not as bad as the film's adaptation, in
No.
my opinion, and it was not as big of a character assassination as Green Arrow, but it's not a solid adaptation. I think the Flash been done dirty just one too many times.
Unfortunately.
Because like even if I don't think Daredevil was a worse film than the Flash film was, sadly, they still I think at their core got Daredevil right. It was
Mm.
just a bad film, and I think that is really what sways me here.
Yeah, I can understand that.
My only complaint with like the Daredevil film and the Daredevil show, and don't get me wrong, the Daredevil show, now that I've rewatched it, wasn't as bad as I remembered for it, is they made him a little bit too serious. And people are like, people were
We
arguing
saw
on Twitter when he
this.
made a joke in She-Hulk.
Yeah,
And they're like, what? He's not like that. And I'm like, no, he is. He's exactly like that. They just made him a little bit too serious. And I get it, like, it was a serious story. But, like,
Yeah, I know what you
he
mean.
is a bit of a clown. He's the Catholic boy who shags like a prostitute. Like, he is a bit of a joke
It's a
at times.
shame that uh he's not been added to Marvel Rivals yet, because that would make a clear winner here.
I do think Daredevil is probably the better adaptation.
I do think so. I
just because
think
he's more consistent.
his show is better. Not saying the Flash is as bad, but like his show was better and more loved.
And more faithful to the character.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Flash film really stunk. So,
and even with my criticism of them making him a bit serious at times, you
mm,
could just argue they're adapting Frank Miller's version where he was a
yeah,
lot more serious.
yeah.
So like you've got options. Legacy.
We touched. I mean, going off what you discussed just earlier, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does not exist technically
So
without Daredevil.
exactly. So the big things for Daredevil are the legacy of being the first disabled superhero and opening that
Yep,
door.
yep,
I think the legacy of the Frank Miller Daredevil Man Without Fear is like comic book legacy. It's one of them comics that kind of was a bit genre defining. And genuinely, he is a massive reason Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles exists, which is another massive IP.
yeah,
On the flip side of that, The Flash, there's been 3 Flashes, you've got the entire Flash family. The Flash reset the DC universe on 2 occasions.
yeah. It's pretty important.
Yeah, and as we've already established, the Flash is like the speedster. All speedsters are kind of, to an extent, imitations of the Flash.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of difficult because do we view the legacy of being like let me work out exactly when the Flash made his first debut here before I make a fool of myself. Flash first appearance. 1940 was when we got our first look at the first Flash. That's a long old time, isn't it?
It is. Here's my thing, right? Daredevil was the first disabled superhero.
Which is unprecedented, quite literally.
Which also affects DC.
Yes.
Which,
and Daredevil's only 24 years younger. 64. Yeah. Like, so, he's not exactly a brand new character.
No. And it's like, yes, there's been many Flashes, and Flash has done a lot for the DC and had a big legacy there. Yes, obviously you can say all the speedsters that are copies of. But actually, Daredevil opened the door to a lot of brand new superheroes that probably are very unique and individual. And without Daredevil opening that door, they never happen.
Exactly.
Which I think is a bigger legacy in the comic book world than you being the reason there's other speedsters.
Yeah, exactly. I think it would be downplaying the importance of what Daredevil accomplished to say that the Flash has a larger legacy. But that is, again, not to downplay the Flash's legacy.
No.
It's just like, I think while he may not be as iconic as Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, he is very close to that tier in impact on the wider genre.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly what legacy is there to define. Because you can have a big legacy from the shadows. And I think until his show came out, that's exactly what Daredevil had done.
Yeah.
Relatability. Now, this is the first one in a while where I can actually very much relate to the Flash. Like, as a character, I find the Flash incredibly relatable. And that kind of feeling like, pardon the pun, you're running constantly and trying to keep up with something is kind of his entire bit is kind of, I'm the fastest man alive, but I can't catch up with life because I'm so all over the place. Is kind of like how we joke about like Spider-Man being the pinnacle of teenager because he is everything a teenager is. He's impulsive, he's a bit of an idiot, he's a bit of a dickhead. But everyone remembers being a teenager and how stressful that was. Now imagine you're also about to fight supervillains and it makes you feel more normal. The Flash is very much the same. He's just trying to live his life and crack on and do things, but no matter what, he's late and he can't keep up with everything and everything's too much. And I find that incredibly relatable. That's why he's one of my favourite characters. I don't find Daredevil particularly relatable. because
I
he's
find
not supposed to be
his
relatable to me, I guess.
I find his extracurricular activities relatable. And his
Are you saying you find how much of a whore he is relatable?
I didn't say
Hey,
that.
I find him letting himself be dealt with by She-Hulk very relatable. That's based. That's
I think
based. It just is.
there is things of Daredevil I think that are relatable in like his outlook on the world and his
Yes.
moral like line of where he does stop and stuff. I mean,
He's not unrelatable.
no.
He does poise some very good questions for people to think about.
I don't know.
I just happen to find the Flash more relatable.
I don't know. I thought it's tough. I think I find both of them have relatable qualities for me.
Oh, absolutely. It's the first time in a while we've actually been able to relate to some of the characters we're discussing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Personal preference. I think I
Yeah,
already know what yours is because
Flash.
we've done 147 episodes of the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, it's the Flash.
Yeah. The Flash and Spider-Man are my two characters. I adore them.
Mm.
It is abs. If it's one of them in the discussion, they're always going to win personal preference. It's that simple. And I love Daredevil. I've got a number of Daredevil comics as well. He's great. But the Flash is my dude.
I actually don't know with this. I think I lean Daredevil, but I think Flash is great. I don't know. I think if the way I'm trying to look at it is like if I was presented, here's a Flash comic, here's a Daredevil comic, I'd pick up Daredevil first.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I also feel like the well-known stories for each character, like Flashpoint versus like Born Again or Man Without Fear. Flashpoint's actually a relatively weak comic. Like it's unfortunate news. It just is what it is. So I feel like I obviously I can't comment. I've not read every single comment from every single comic from every single run for both characters, but I feel like the big remembered stories for Daredevil are probably a bit better than the Flash. But I feel like the Flash has been more consistent for a longer period. The Flash has, my opinion, one of the best rogues galleries in the fucking history of comics. But like you say, it is your personal preference. If you're in your head, you're like, I'm probably gonna pick up Daredevil first. There you go. That's your answer, innit? But there we have it. I've kind of kept a rough mental tally, but let's tally this up.
Yeah.
So Iconic-ness we agreed was probably the Flash.
Yeah.
Individuality was Daredevil.
Yeah, I think it leans slightly Daredevil, maybe Ty.
Okay. Quality of adaptation was definitely Daredevil.
Yeah, that was Daredevil.
Legacy was Daredevil.
Yeah.
So that makes it 3-1.
Yeah.
Relatability, you were kind of on the fence. I was very much Flash.
Yeah, I was like both sort of equally.
Okay, so that makes it 3-2 Daredevil.
Yeah.
And then personal preference was a tie, keeping it at 3-2 Daredevil. So Daredevil was our winner of the Pop Culture Powerhouse. And it's hilarious. So I do genuinely believe if that Flash film were banged, he probably wins this.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of it. It's Pop Culture Powerhouse. Talk about it as it is right this second.
Yeah, I mean, in 2-3 years when James Gunn gives us a Flash film, this will probably flip back to there.
I will dye my hair red and get in the best run of shape you've ever seen, James. Hit my line. But that is it from us this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pop Culture Powerhouse. We'll see you next time.
See you in the next one.